Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave and this video is another one talking about overdrive and distortion pedals. Now I did a video recently where I was showing you different ways to use an overdrive pedal, and in the beginning of that I mentioned that we tend to talk about overdrive and distortion in the same breath, but they are actually different effects, and I thought what I'd do in this video is talk a little bit about overdrive and distortion, explain what the difference is, and hopefully help you understand which one is the best or the most appropriate effect for your particular use case. Now, I'm going to start with my usual disclaimer. I'm going to be explaining things, which means I'm going to be talking. People often give me a lot of grief on this channel for, why don't you just shut up and play? The reason is I could just say, hey guys, this is overdrive, this is distortion, and you wouldn't understand what the difference is between them. I'm going to spend a bit of time today explaining what's going on inside those pedals and why they are different. So let's get going. So people often describe the difference between overdrive and distortion as overdrive is a dirty sound and distortion is just like more overdrive, which is kind of true, but there's a little bit more to it than that because of what's going on in the pedal circuitry. So to quickly recap what happens in any sort of drive pedal or distortion pedal, it's about gain. We talk about taking the signal and basically increasing the level of it until it distorts. So if you think about the sound that comes from your guitar, looks like think of it in terms of a waveform looking like this. And what happens in the pedal is it boosts the level of that to such a point that it goes beyond a threshold more than the circuitry can handle, and the signal starts to what we call clip. Now, depending on the way that the pedal works, the particular op amps and all the bits of electronics, you might get different types of clipping. You get like what we call hard clipping or soft clipping, which is to do kind of the shape of the wave as it reaches kind of that flat point as it hits the limit. We get something called symmetric or asymmetric clipping, where the positive phase of the wave and the negative phase of the wave might clip differently, and that all subtly affects the way that the distorted or the overdriven sounds. But the basic principle is the same in all cases. So looking at an overdrive sound, so here I'm going to be using a Boss Blues driver. This is a fairly typical overdrive sort of sound, just going into the clean channel on the amp. That sounds perfectly pleasant. It's got a bit of dirt to it. The gain's set probably about halfway on that. These aren't especially hot pickups. This is a DiMarzio tone zone, so it's on the high side of medium output, so it's not pushing particularly hard. And with the overdrive pedal, that's what we get. So switching over to distortion, this pedal, it's an Arion SDI1, sort of mid to late 80s distortion pedal. I got this one recently because I wanted one for this video. I don't have a distortion pedal. I found this one on a popular internet auction site. I used to have an Arion distortion back in the day. It was actually quite a good pedal, so when I saw this one up for grabs, I grabbed it, and it sounds like this. So as you can hear, there's more dirt there. So what we're saying about distortion pedal being like more overdrive, that's kind of true. It's a little bit more toppy, a little bit more trebly perhaps than the overdrive sound. Now, obviously, there's loads of different types of pedal. Lots of different types of overdrive, lots of different types of distortion pedal from different manufacturers. How they interact with your guitar, your pickups, your playing style, your amplifier. There's loads of different variables. So we're talking in fairly broad concepts here, but generally distortion pedal is a little bit more bright, a little bit more trebly. In fact, one of the most popular distortion pedals, the Boss DS1, the criticism I hear about that most frequently is it's too bright. Yeah, it's bright, just turn the tone knob down and it's fine. So that's one of the differences, is kind of the voice is a little bit brighter, as well as there being a little bit more overdrive. So is that all that there is to it? Well, no, there's not. There's a couple of other things that's worth mentioning. First of all is the way that the sound is processed within the pedal and the effect of compression. So as I mentioned, you have the sound wave that looks like this, and then it gets amplified and clipped. So if you think the pedal makes the sound louder till it gets to the point that it's clipped, and then it kind of brings the level down to something usable. So that's like a compression pedal. If you think what a compressor does, is it gets rid of the overly high or overly low volumes and kind of compresses the volume range. It's a similar sort of thing that's happening in a drive pedal. It's boosting the signal to give you the clipping, and then it compresses the volume range of it. So if we look at the overdrive pedal and just think about it in terms of picking dynamics, I can dig in a little bit, I can ease off, and you get that difference in volume and the amount of drive as well. If I just pick really lightly and then start to get more aggressive with my picking, yeah, you can hear it getting louder, and as it gets louder, there's a little bit more drive there because it's got more signal to work with in the pedal. Boosts it more, and you get the clipping effect. But contrast that to the distortion pedal. Now there I was playing with some dynamics in my picking. Those strokes were a little bit harder, some were a little bit softer, but the general volume that you're hearing was pretty much the same. So let's try that again. Just starting on one string, just picking a note quite softly, and then getting more aggressive with the picking. Yeah, not as much dynamic range there. And that's because of what's happening in the pedal. The distortion pedal is putting much more gain into the signal, and then when it gets compressed down, it means it loses some of the dynamic range. So there's a trade-off there between it being able to have picking dynamics or having tons and tons of gain. If you watch the earlier video that I did talking about using drive pedals, I mentioned the idea of chaining drive pedals together, what we call gain stacking. And that is one of those things that allows you to have more gain by having multiple drive pedals, but it kind of keeps the picking dynamics because no individual pedal is compressing the signal so much that you lose that dynamic range. So that's sort of one key difference between overdrive and distortion, is the amount of like picking dynamics that you can hear with that. Let's also talk a little bit about harmonics. Now I mentioned before about the brightness that you get from the distortion pedal. So, you know, with overdrive or distortion, there's more gain there, but you can hear there's a lot more like brightness going on in the distorted sound. So to understand why that is, we need to think a little bit about the physics. Now, if I just play, I'm going to go into a clean sound here. If I play a note, what you're hearing there is an open A string, so you're hearing an A. What's actually happening in effect is you're getting the tone of an A note, what we call the fundamental, but also coming into your ears is what we call the first harmonic, second harmonic, which is 1 octave higher, 2 octaves higher. There's a third harmonic, which is higher again. And you've got things like there'll be perfect fifth in there. All these different harmonics sit in there as well. So if you think about the graph of, let's get technical here. If you think about the graph of the tones that you're hearing the fundamental, which is the loudest, but you're also hearing a series of overtones, these harmonics, which are higher frequencies, but they're not as loud. And it's the way that you get the balance between the fundamental tone and the different harmonics that give individual instruments and whatnot their sound, their particular voices, kind of that balance of the overtones. You don't consciously hear them, but they are there. It's all to do with the way air vibrates when you play a string. Anyway, that's what you're hearing. So let's think about what happens if we take this sound with this range of overtones, the fundamental and these overtones, put it into a gain stage. We boost the level across the board, so everything gets louder. The fundamental gets louder, all of those overtones, those harmonics, they get louder as well. then what happens is the pedal will compress the volume range and bring everything down. Now look at the relative volume of those harmonics, those overtones, versus the fundamental. Yeah, when you've gone through the process of boosting the gain and then compressing it down, relatively speaking, the volume of some of those overtones is higher, which is why when we play a heavily distorted sound like that, got like that fizziness to it, it's got that brightness because you're hearing a lot more of the upper harmonics starting to come through. Yeah, and if you think about it, if those harmonics, if those overtones are more prominent in the sound when you've got some distortion there, then that's why playing harmonics with a distorted sound so much easier. Okay, so that, with a bit of science about what's going on in terms of the electronics, explains a bit more about the difference between overdrive and distortion. It's true to say distortion is like more overdrive, but hopefully now you kind of understand what's going on in the pedals and why there's that difference in sound between an overdrive and a distortion, and kind of which one's better for you. If you want really high gain, if you're playing like super hard rock, you're playing metal, something like that, you probably want to go towards the distortion end of things. But remember, by doing so, you've got a much more compressed sound coming out of the pedal, so you'll lose picking dynamics. If you want to play something where picking dynamics and feel is more important, you know, if you're playing blues or classic rock or something, you're probably going to go towards the overdrive end of things. If you want lots of gain, but picking dynamics, a good compromise could be 2 or 3, say 2, possibly 3 gain stages, overdrive pedals stacked, or putting an overdrive pedal into the dirty channel on the amp to allow you to have a little bit more dynamic range there while getting a lot of a bit more gain. You're not going to have like a lot of gain that you would with an overdrive pedal, but you will retain the picking dynamics, so it's a bit of a balancing act. Experiment. Like I say, there's so many variations, the different types of pedal that there are. So many models of overdrive, so many models of distortion, you know, the way you play the guitar, the way you pick, the sound of the pickups, your amplifier, all that other stuff. There's not like one textbook distortion sound. There's so many variables, so you'll need to experiment a little bit, but hopefully what I've shown you in this video will kind of give you some context and you kind of know, are you going to go down the distortion path or down the overdrive path? Okay. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that useful and interesting. If you did, then please click like down there. If you really enjoyed it and you want to see other things that I post onto the channel, then please click subscribe and also click the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. You're welcome to leave a comment. I don't always see comments that are left on videos, so if you've got a specific question that you want to ask me, whether it's about pedals, guitar gear in general, guitar playing, music theory, anything at all, you're better off going here, fill that form in, send your question in, it comes directly to me, so I can get around to answering it in a future video. Right, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.